Last Friday was an amazing day for movie releases, and I will not apologize that this is the one I decided to talk about. Considering how often I discuss both comedy and horror on this channel, it shouldn't be a surprise that I really enjoy horror comedies when they're good. But making a good horror comedy is hard as heck, so it's unfortunate that the genre doesn't see more experimentation. I talked recently about the 2006 cult hit Behind the Mask, which is flawed but interesting largely thanks to its mockumentary aesthetic. It at least looks different, even if it's got the same foundation as everything else. Established horror concept, but funny now. Look, I love Shaun of the Dead, Cabin in the Woods, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, etc., 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 with every fiber of my being. But they're just taking classy, spooky situations and then making them hilarious. Which is why the recent works of writer-director Christopher Landon have been so exciting to me, because he's flipped the script, taking established comedy concepts and injecting horror into those instead. I mean, look at his 2017 film Happy Death Day. The fact that it was seen as Groundhog Day but a slasher and not like Halloween with a funny death loop tells you everything you need to know. And Happy Death Day was one of the biggest surprises of the past few years. I went to see it with some friends on a whim during the height of MoviePass, because the real benefit of that and services like it is the ability to just see things you're vaguely interested in without needing to worry about whether they're actually worth $17 or what have you. And I had an absolute blast. And also literally cried, which I'm not going to unpack, but hopefully makes the point. And then the sequel was awesome too. It was definitely less horror-y and more into the sci-fi aspects of it all, but still a heck of a lot of fun. And fun really feels like the key factor for any horror comedy, right? Now, I'm sure that there are other people doing interesting things with the genre that I'm just not aware of, and please let me know in the comments because I'd really love to see them. But I'm drawing a blank other than perhaps Joseph Kahn's Detention, but that mashes up so many genres that reducing it to horror comedy doesn't seem right. So I'm excited that Landon has come back to remind everyone just how much can be gained from bringing other genre conventions into the conventions of genre. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Weekend Review. You can call me typically the bad guy in these types of situations. And today, I am talking about Freaky. Where the name Happy Death Day does not instantly tell you what's going on, Freaky gives up the game, assuming you're aware of the classic 1976 comedy Freaky Friday or its 2003 remake, because pretty much no one has used the word freaky in a movie title in decades that was not a direct reference to one of those, so we can be reasonably confident that we're going to be getting some body swapping going in. And from the posters, we understand that it will star Blockers and Pokemon Detective Pikachu co-star Katherine Newton, as well as Vince Vaughn. And when I saw Vaughn's name, I'll admit I was a little surprised. Like, the guy who starred in that weird-ass remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, as well as noted racist S. Craig Zahler's Brawl in Cell Block 99, seems like a weird choice for a comedy, you know? That was a joke. But seriously, dude's got a wild filmography. And so we can easily assume that those two will be swapped at some point, but of course we don't know their relationship. Is this some real Freaky Friday shit where Vaughn plays a secret serial killer father who switches bodies with his daughter and hilarity and carnage ensue? Well, no. Freaky wants to set itself up as a more traditional slasher story before pulling the rug out. We don't even see protagonist Millie Kessler in the opening scene, but we sure do see the Blissfield Butcher, and he lives up to his name. Where the Happy's Death Day were PG-13 and thus lacking in blood and on-screen violence in general, Freaky is rated R and revels in it. The film opens with some teens at a big old mansion sitting around a fire and telling spooky stories about that local legend who's been working since the 70s, which prompts one kid to laugh off the idea of a geriatric serial killer, to which we get this not even really a joke, don't underestimate a straight white man's propensity for violence. And that's just, sadly, good life advice. But it turns out to be especially true in this film because the stories have undersold him. If you've seen Halloween 2018, then you'll have a pretty good sense of the sort of dispassionate brutality we're working with here. The first kid gets a bottle shoved down his throat and then shattered through his neck. And things escalate from there. And it's worth pausing for a moment to consider whether it's a little too much. Later on, the really bad things happen to people the movie has actively made us dislike. So we can just sit back and enjoy the chainsaw or whatever. But at this point in the story, we're just watching some random girl we have no animosity towards getting her head smashed in with a toilet seat. And that's not really funny. And I get that it's important to emphasize not only how vicious the butcher is, but also how strong he is, since that's got plot significance. But the opening feels straight up sadistic in a way that the rest of the film doesn't. And I don't love that for it. But it sets up the larger stakes for when we meet Millie soon after. Unfortunately, things aren't going great for her at the moment. Her father died a year before, driving her mother to drink, and her cop sister to be more cop-like. Is that worse? It somehow seems worse. Millie wants to get away from it and go to school away from home, but she's also worried about her mom and that her mom won't let her go and all of that typical teen girl in a movie stuff you'd expect, and is not actually dissimilar from Newton's own character in Blockers, another of the big surprises from the past few years. But even if her home life is difficult, at least she has her friends, Josh and Nyla, who together form a trifecta of representation that will band together to take down the hegemony of the straight white man. Even if, for most of the film, one of them will be inhabiting that man's body. Earlier jokes aside, Vince Vaughn is perfect in this. I've always been kind of neutral towards him as a performer, but the combination of his comedic chops with his weird stints as an ultra-violent psychopath work together to make him convincing as both a genuine threat and also a confused 5'5" girl suddenly in a 6'5" man's body. And Newton is clearly having a great time in the role of a 6'5" butcher stuck in a 5'5" girl's body. And considering the strength we saw in that first scene, it is funny to see Butcher Newton furious at their sudden inability to break down a door just by kicking it. And on the other side, Millie Vaughn's sudden attempts at calming down her understandably freaked out friends, resulting in her literally throwing them across the room because she doesn't understand her new body's abilities. Now, you might think that mining comedy from a grown man acting like a little girl is some obnoxious late 90s, early aughts gender stereotyping bullshit, and perhaps I will get canceled for saying that I laughed very hard the first time that I saw Millie Vaughn run like a girl. But hear me out. Get over yourself. But seriously, the reason the joke works is because it isn't really at anyone's expense. It's sad that this has to be the case because it really should just generally be true, but I'm not surprised that Landon is gay and has been out for more than 2 decades, because no one ever comments on the fact that this big man has some feminine physicality. It's just an inevitable result of what happened, and Vaughn commits hard to it. People are confused when they see him, say, do the school's mascot dance, but the joke isn't that, oh, a man is doing a girl thing, that's not God's way. And once they understand what's going on, everyone just buys into it, and it's totally fine. Nowhere is this more true than in the way that Millie's crush, Booker Strode. Did you catch the subtle reference to the classic 2009 Rob Zombie film Halloween 2? Very clever. Comes around to the whole thing. This could have so easily been incredibly creepy, but it never crosses that line, so it just gets to be kind of adorable, and we stan acceptance on this YouTube channel. And I'm so glad, because freaky as a concept just checks a lot of boxes for me. Slasher, love it. Coming of age, my fave. Fucking trap metal on the soundtrack, hell yeah. Seriously, the soundtrack is awesome, featuring Dua Lipa, Paris, and the gosh damn Suicide Boys, which, like, The only thing better than a trap metal song in a body-swapping slasher movie would be maybe putting my trap metal song in a body-swapping slasher movie, but it's fine. We'll get there. Or not. And it really does get the blending of the genres right. After that brutal opening, it's actually a while until we see something intense like that again, allowing the film to really focus on making the characters interesting. It reminds me a little bit of Joseph Kahn's Detention in that way, because that film starts off bloody, but at some point just sort of lowers the temperature so we can all get invested before it's brought back to boiling. In Freaky, everyone is obviously out to catch the Butcher in whichever form they believe he's in, but the film itself is far less interested in the exploits of Butcher Newton than Millie Vaughn. Butcher Newton is there for catharsis, to take down some of the awful people who had made the real Millie's life miserable while looking like a total badass in the process. And that's fun every once in a while, but I prefer the scales be tipped towards the dramedy of the situation, and Freaky obliges. We get some legitimately touching dramatic moments in all of this. It never made me cry like Happy Death Day weirdly did, but I definitely felt some feelings and had a fantastic time in the process. 8.4 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hammer and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, Magnolia Denton, Elliot Fowler, Greg Lucina, Liam Knipe, Vanna van Alphen, Kojo, and Phil Bates. If you like this video, that's great. If not, don't care. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you in the next one.